The torrential downpour outside was nothing compared to the storm raging inside the Sterling mansion. One moment, Isabella Sterling was cradling her stomach, dreaming of the nursery she'd designed. The next, she was staring at a set of glossy photographs her husband Nathaniel had just thrown on the marble coffee table. They showed her in a seemingly compromising position with a man she'd never met. It was a lie, a cruel, impossible lie, and yet the venom in her mother-in-law's eyes and the chilling emptiness in her husband's confirmed her fate. Before she could even process the betrayal, the heavy oak doors of the life she knew were slammed shut behind her, leaving her pregnant, penniless, and alone in the unforgiving night. But they made one fatal mistake. They forgot about the one man more powerful than all of them, her billionaire father-in-law, Richard Sterling. And he was about to find out everything. The air in the grand drawing room of the Sterling estate in Greenwich, Connecticut, was thick with the scent of lilies and betrayal. The lilies, funereal and white, were Genevieve Sterling's favorite. The betrayal was a new addition to the decor. Isabella Rossi Sterling stood on the Aubusson carpet, the plush wool a cruel mockery of comfort beneath her trembling feet. The silk of her maternity blouse, once a soft caress, now felt like a shroud. Her hand instinctively went to the gentle curve of her belly, a silent promise to the tiny life within, that she would protect them, even as her own world was being systematically demolished. Across from her, her husband of 2 years, Nathaniel Sterling, wouldn't meet her gaze. His handsome face, usually so quick to smile, was a mask of strained indifference. His attention was fixed on the damning photographs scattered across the polished surface of a Louis XV coffee table. They were expertly crafted forgeries, showing Isabella in an intimate cafe setting with a man whose face was artfully obscured, his hand resting on hers. A private moment that never happened. A lie spun from pixels and malice. The architect of this destruction, Genevieve Sterling, stood beside her son, a vision in Chanel tweed and icy condescension. Her silver hair was coiffed into a perfect helmet, unyielding and severe, much like the woman herself. Her eyes the same cold grey as a winter sky raked over Isabella with undisguised contempt. "I knew it from the start." Genevieve began, her voice a low, cultured hiss that cut deeper than any shout. "I told you, Nathaniel. Blood will always out. You can't turn a little museum curator from Brooklyn into a Sterling. She has no breeding, no integrity." "Genevieve, please," Isabella whispered, her voice cracking. "Nathaniel, look at me. You know me. This isn't real. Someone did this to us." Nathaniel finally lifted his head. The conflict in his eyes was agonizing to watch. He was a man caught between the woman he professed to love and the mother whose approval he had craved his entire life. But weakness, Isabella was learning, was a far more corrosive acid than outright evil. "They are dated, Bella," he said, his voice hollow. "From last month, while I was in Singapore. My mother's investigator has phone records too. A man named... It doesn't matter. How could you? There is no man." Isabella's voice rose, laced with a desperation that only seemed to confirm her guilt in their eyes. "I was at the Met planning the new exhibit. I was attending prenatal appointments. I was here waiting for you. This is a lie." Genevieve let out a delicate, theatrical scoff. "Oh, the drama! And to think you're carrying a child. Are you even certain it's Nathaniel's, or does it belong to your accomplice?" The accusation struck Isabella with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from her lungs. She looked at Nathaniel, pleading with her eyes for him to defend her, to defend their child. He just shook his head, a gesture of pathetic surrender. In that moment, the love she thought they shared evaporated, leaving behind a cold, hard stone of realization in her gut. He was not her partner. He was his mother's son. "I want her out of my house," Genevieve declared, turning to Nathaniel as if Isabella were no longer in the room. "Now, with nothing but the clothes on her back. We will have our lawyers draft a quiet annulment, citing irreconcilable differences. We'll be generous, of course, provided she signs a non-disclosure agreement and disappears." "Wait," Isabella stammered, her mind racing. "My things? My purse, my phone?" Genevieve smiled, a tight, cruel stretching of her lips. "Your privileges have been revoked. The Sterling legal team will handle the disposition of your effects. You will be escorted from the premises." She pressed a small, discreet button on the wall. Within seconds, 2 burly security guards in dark suits entered the room, their faces impassive. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Isabella's shock. "Nathaniel, don't let her do this. This is our home. This is our baby." He flinched at the word, baby. The only flicker of humanity he'd shown. But it was fleeting. He looked away toward the rain-lashed windows. "It's for the best, Bella. My mother. She knows what's right for the family." "The family?" Isabella's voice dripped with a sudden icy calm. The desperation was gone, replaced by a clarity born of absolute betrayal. "Or the Sterling brand. The Sterling fortune." The guards flanking her now gently took her arms. The touch was professional, but it felt like a violation. She didn't resist. She walked with a dignity she didn't know she possessed, her head held high. As they passed Nathaniel, she stopped and looked directly at him, forcing him to meet her gaze one last time. "I will never forget this, Nathaniel," she said, her voice low and steady. "And one day you will have to explain to your child why you let your mother throw their pregnant mother out into a storm based on a lie." He had no response. He just stood there, a hollow man in a gilded cage. The heavy front doors swung open, revealing a night ripped apart by wind and rain. The manicured lawns of the estate were shrouded in a churning darkness. One of the guards held an umbrella, a perfunctory gesture of courtesy that was almost insulting. He walked her down the sweeping stone steps to the edge of the long, winding driveway. "A car will be here in 5 minutes to take you to a hotel for the night," he said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable. Isabella shook her head. She knew what that meant. A hotel chosen by Genevieve. A gilded prison where she would be watched, managed, and forced to sign away her life. "No, thank you," she said, her voice surprisingly firm. "I'll find my own way." Before the guard could protest, she turned and started walking. The rain immediately plastered her silk blouse to her skin, the cold seeping into her bones. The wind tore at her hair, whipping it across her face. Each step down the long private road, away from the mocking lights of the mansion, was an act of sheer will. She had no phone, no wallet, no plan. All she had was the fierce, primal instinct to protect the life growing inside her, and a burning, righteous anger that was quickly becoming the only thing keeping her warm. The gates of the Sterling estate loomed ahead, a black iron portcullis marking the border between a life of luxurious lies and a future of terrifying unknown truth. And as she passed through them, a sob finally escaped her lips, lost in the howling of the wind. She was free, but she had never felt more alone. The walk from the Sterling estate to the main road felt like a pilgrimage through purgatory. Each squelch of her soaked designer flats on the asphalt was a reminder of the life she had just lost. The manicured hedges and ancient oak trees that lined the private drive, once symbols of sanctuary and permanence, now seemed like silent, judgmental sentinels. By the time Isabella reached the main road, she was drenched, shivering, and utterly disoriented. The passing headlights of cars cut through the deluge, illuminating her for a brief, startling moment, a ghost of a woman in a ruined silk blouse standing on the edge of nowhere. For a terrifying hour, she walked her mind a maelstrom of shock and grief. The initial adrenaline had worn off, leaving a bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the rain. How could Nathaniel believe it? How could the man who had whispered promises of forever in her ear just last week now look at her with such cold suspicion? And Genevieve. Isabella had always known her mother-in-law was difficult, that she saw Isabella as an inadequate addition to her perfect dynasty. But she had never imagined this level of calculated cruelty. To fabricate evidence to poison her own son's mind, to cast out his pregnant wife without a shred of compassion. It was monstrous. Her feet were raw, her body ached, but one thought propelled her forward. Chloe. Chloe Davis was her opposite in almost every way. Where Isabella was thoughtful and measured, Chloe was a firecracker of righteous indignation and fierce loyalty. A tenacious journalist for an online investigative news outlet, Chloe lived in a cramped but vibrant fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria, Queens, a universe away from the sterile opulence of Greenwich. They had been friends since their scholarship days at Columbia, a bond forged over late-night study sessions and cheap pizza. Hitching a ride was out of the question. Flagging down a taxi without a penny to her name was impossible. Her only hope was the train station a few miles away. She remembered seeing it once on a drive with Nathaniel. She focused on the memory, using it as a beacon. When she finally stumbled onto the platform, she must have looked like a wraith. A sympathetic station agent, a kind-faced woman named Martha, saw her shivering form and took pity on her. "Honey, are you all right? You look like you've been through a war." Isabella, her teeth chattering, could barely form the words. I was robbed. They took everything. My purse, my phone. I just need to get to Astoria." It wasn't a complete lie. She had been robbed, just not in the way the woman imagined. Martha's expression softened. She looked at Isabella's belly, then back at her pale, rain-streaked face. Without a word, she slid a ticket through the window. "On the house," she said quietly. "You go get yourself somewhere warm and safe." The simple act of kindness was so overwhelming that Isabella burst into tears, mumbling her thanks, before hurrying onto the waiting train. The warmth of the carriage was a blessing. She huddled in a corner seat, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to become invisible as the train rattled its way toward the city. It was past midnight when she finally stood outside Chloe's apartment building. She pressed the buzzer for 4B, praying her friend was home. A moment later, a crackly voice answered. "Yeah, who is it?" "Chloe, it's me. It's Isabella." The silence on the other end was heavy with confusion. "Bella, what's wrong? You sound awful. Can you just let me in? Please." The lock buzzed immediately. Isabella pushed the heavy door open and began the slow, arduous climb up 4 flights of stairs. Each step was a monumental effort. When she reached the landing, Chloe's door was already open. Her friend stood there in faded sweatpants and an old t-shirt. Her usually sharp features clouded with worry. The sight of Chloe's familiar, concerned face was the final crack in Isabella's crumbling composure. A choked sob escaped her, and she practically fell into her friend's arms. "Whoa, Bella. Hey, you're okay. I've got at you," Chloe murmured, guiding her inside and shutting the door against the world. She led Isabella to the worn, comfortable sofa, wrapped her in a thick fleece blanket, and immediately put a kettle on the stove. "Talk to me," Chloe said, her journalist's instincts kicking in, but tempered with deep affection. "What the hell happened? Where's Nathaniel? You're soaking wet and freezing." Between shivering fits and ragged breaths, Isabella told her everything. The setup, the faked photographs, Genevieve's venomous accusations, Nathaniel's spineless betrayal, being thrown out into the storm with nothing. Chloe listened, her expression hardening from concern to disbelief, and then to pure, unadulterated rage. "That absolute witch!" Chloe seethed, pacing the small living rooms like a caged tigress. "And Nathaniel, that gutless, silver-spooned coward. I swear to God. Bella, I will end them. I will write an exposé that will strip the paint from their multi-million-dollar walls." "It's not about revenge right now, Chloe," Isabella whispered, sipping the hot tea Chloe had pressed into her hands. The warmth was slowly chasing the chill from her body. "I don't know what to do. I have nothing. They control everything. The accounts were all joint, but I never had direct access. They'll paint me as an unhinged, cheating gold digger." Chloe stopped pacing and knelt in front of Isabella, her eyes blazing with determination. "No, we're not going to let that happen. First things first, you are safe here. This is your home now, for as long as you need it. Tomorrow we get you to a doctor to make sure you and the baby are okay. Then we start fighting back." She took Isabella's hands. "You are not the timid little mouse Genevieve thinks you are. You are one of the smartest women I know. You're strong, and you're a mother now. They didn't just kick you out, Bella. They declared war on your child, and they have no idea who they're messing with." For the first time all night, a tiny flicker of hope ignited within Isabella. Huddled in Chloe's tiny, cluttered, book-filled apartment, wrapped in a second-hand blanket, she felt more secure than she ever had in the cold, cavernous rooms of the Sterling mansion. The gilded cage had shattered, but here in this haven built on genuine friendship, she could start to gather the pieces. The fight wouldn't be easy, but she wouldn't be fighting it alone. And she was fighting for more than just herself now. She was fighting for the small, innocent life that depended entirely on her. The storm outside was beginning to subside. The storm inside Isabella, however, was just starting to gather its strength. Thousands of miles away, in the penthouse suite of the Park Hyatt Tokyo, Richard Sterling closed a deal worth 9 figures, with a brisk handshake and a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. At 65, Richard was a titan of industry, the architect of the Sterling global logistics empire. He was a man of cold logic, ruthless efficiency, and immense understated power. He moved through the world with the quiet confidence of a man who owned most of it. His personal life was something he'd largely outsourced to his wife, Genevieve. He provided the vast resources, and she curated their social standing, managed the households, and raised their son. He trusted her judgment in these matters implicitly, not out of deep emotional connection, but out of a CEO's faith in a long-serving, reliable department head. He'd met Isabella a handful of times. She was pretty quiet and seemed to make Nathaniel happy. Richard didn't deal in happiness. He dealt in assets and liabilities. Isabella seemed like a neutral asset. She didn't come from money or influence, which was a minor liability in Genevieve's eyes, but she was educated and discreet, which Richard appreciated. He had bigger things to worry about than his son's domestic arrangements. The call from Genevieve came as he was overlooking the glittering expanse of Tokyo. Her voice was strained, crafted to sound mournful. "Richard, something dreadful has happened," she said. "It's Isabella." He listened without interruption as she spun her carefully edited tale. Isabella had been unfaithful. There was irrefutable proof. A terrible, sordid affair. Nathaniel was devastated, of course. For the good of the family, to avoid a scandal, they had to act quickly. Isabella had been sent away with a generous settlement offer, pending to handle things quietly. Richard felt a stab of annoyance. Not at Isabella's supposed infidelity. He was too pragmatic to be shocked by such things, but at the messiness of it all. "Did you handle it cleanly?" He asked, his tone all business. "No chance of this hitting the press." "Of course, darling," Genevieve assured him. "I have it all under control. I'm focusing on helping Nathaniel through this difficult time." "Good," Richard said, already dismissing it. "I'll be back in 2 days. Keep it quiet." He hung up and turned his attention back to his quarterly reports. The matter, as far as he was concerned, was closed. But 24 hours later, another message arrived. It wasn't a call or an official email. It was an encrypted text message to his private unlisted phone, a number known to only 5 people in the world. The sender was anonymous. The message was short and chillingly direct. They lied. "She is pregnant with your grandchild. They threw her out in a storm with nothing. Ask your head of household staff, Mrs. Davies." She saw everything. Richard Sterling stared at the message, his blood running cold. Pregnant. The word seemed to hang in the air, changing the entire equation. An affair was a messy inconvenience. A pregnant daughter-in-law cast out into the street was a different matter entirely. It was a matter of legacy. Of blood. He dismissed the possibility of a prank. No one had this number. This was a calculated move. And it had worked. A seed of doubt, hard and sharp, was planted in his mind. He trusted Genevieve's management of their social lives, but he had never mistaken her for a sentimentalist. Her ambition for the Sterling name was a cold, hard thing. Was it cold enough to do this? His next call was not to Genevieve or Nathaniel. It was to Alistair Finch, the head of his personal security detail for 30 years. Finch was a former MI6 agent, a man of absolute discretion and formidable capability. "Alistair," Richard said, his voice low and devoid of emotion, "I have a delicate and urgent matter. I need you to conduct a quiet investigation at the Greenwich estate. I want you to speak with the head housekeeper, Eleanor Davies. Discreetly. I want to know the exact circumstances under which my daughter-in-law Isabella left the property 2 nights ago. I want to know her current whereabouts, and most importantly, I need you to verify something for me. I need to know if she is pregnant." "Consider it done, Mr. Sterling," Finch replied, his voice a calm, professional baritone. There was no surprise, no questions, just execution. The second call was to his legal team. "Pull every document related to Nathaniel's prenuptial agreement with Isabella Rossi," he commanded. "And I want a full independent audit of every expense Genevieve has charged to the household accounts for the last 6 months. I want it on my desk by the time I land." For the rest of the day, Richard went through the motions of his business meetings, but his mind was elsewhere. He was replaying his brief interactions with Isabella. She had always seemed genuine, a little intimidated by their world, perhaps, but her eyes were clear and direct. He remembered her excitement when talking about a medieval art exhibit she was helping to curate. It was a passion that couldn't be faked. He compared that image with the venom in Genevieve's voice over the phone. A discrepancy. Richard Sterling had built his empire by noticing and exploiting discrepancies. The flight back to New York on his private Gulfstream was tense. He didn't sleep. He stared out of the window at the endless carpet of clouds below, a silent fury building within him. If this was true, it wasn't just a family squabble. It was a profound betrayal of his own code. The Sterlings did not prey on the weak. They did not harm women and children. They were predators in the boardroom, yes, but they were supposed to be patricians in their own home. Genevieve's obsession with social status had, he feared, curdled into something ugly and cruel. And Nathaniel. His son's weakness was a constant source of disappointment. If he had allowed this to happen, he was not the man Richard had hoped to one day leave his empire to. When the jet touched down at Teterboro Airport, Alistair Finch was waiting on the tarmac beside the black sedan. He opened the door for Richard, his face an unreadable mask. "Well?" Richard asked as the car pulled silently away. Finch didn't waste words. He handed Richard a slim folder. "Mrs. Davies confirms your wife's account of the confrontation, but her personal observation was that Mrs. Sterling seemed distraught and genuinely confused, not guilty. She was forced to leave without any personal belongings. The security guards on duty confirm she was left on the main road in the middle of the storm. As for her location, she is currently staying with a friend, a Miss Chloe Davis in Queens." He paused, letting the information sink in before delivering the final crucial piece. "And, sir, I had a trusted medical contact discreetly check with her OB/GYN. Isabella Sterling is indeed 16 weeks pregnant. The paternity was confirmed via a non-invasive prenatal test 6 weeks ago. The father is with 99.9% certainty your son." Richard Sterling closed his eyes. The quiet hum of the luxury car's engine was the only sound. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. A cold, terrifying calm settled over him. The lion had been sleeping content to let others manage his domain. But now he was awake, and he was hungry. "Change of destination, Alistair," he said, his voice like chips of ice. "We're not going to Greenwich. We're going to the city office. It's time to restructure the family." Richard Sterling's Manhattan office, occupying the entire top floor of the Sterling Tower, was a monument to power. It was sleek, minimalist, and offered a panoramic view of the city he had in many ways conquered. But Richard wasn't interested in the view. He sat behind his vast obsidian desk, the slim folder from Alistair Finch lying open before him. On his screen was the household audit he had requested. The numbers told a story of their own, a series of large, unusual payments to a private investigation firm he'd never heard of. Another substantial payment to a digital forensics specialist based out of a shady downtown office. It was a breadcrumb trail of deceit, and Genevieve hadn't been clever enough to hide it from a man who could financially dissect a corporation in his sleep. He summoned his son. Nathaniel arrived an hour later, looking flustered. He likely expected a debrief about the Tokyo trip, perhaps a perfunctory question about the unpleasantness with Isabella. He walked in with a practiced air of weary filial duty. "Father," he began, "welcome back. I trust the trip was successful." Richard didn't answer. He simply gestured to the chair opposite his desk. The silence stretched thick and heavy. Nathaniel shifted uncomfortably. "I imagine Mother filled you in on the situation with your pregnant wife," Richard interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. Nathaniel froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving him pale and gaunt under the office's cool lighting. I don't know what you mean. Don't you?" Richard slid one of the faked photographs across the desk. "Your mother presented you with these, I believe." Nathaniel nodded dumbly. Richard then slid a second piece of paper across the desk. It was the report from Alistair Finch, with a single line highlighted the confirmation of the positive prenatal paternity test. And I assume you had seen this as well. Weeks ago, Richard stated. It was not a question. Nathaniel's composure shattered. He slumped in his chair, a puppet with its strings cut. Father, I can explain. Mother was so certain. The investigator. The pictures looked so real. She said Isabella was trying to trap us, that the baby might not even be mine. His voice trailed off into a pathetic mumble. The excuses of a child caught in a lie. Richard leaned forward, his grey eyes pinning his son in place. There was no anger in his voice, only a chilling, profound disappointment that was infinitely worse. She said the investigator said, "Do you have a mind of your own, Nathaniel, or is it merely a repository for your mother's ambitions and suspicions? Did you ask your wife? Did you look the woman carrying your child in the eye and give her the benefit of a single doubt?" I was confused, Nathaniel whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. You were a coward, Richard corrected him, the words sharp as shards of glass. You stood by while your mother, my wife, executed a character assassination of the most vulgar and cruel kind. You let her throw your pregnant wife out of her home with nothing. Not a phone to call for help, not $1 for a cab. In a storm. Is that the kind of man you are? Is that the leader I'm supposed to entrust a global enterprise to a man who cannot even manage the affairs of his own house with a shred of decency or courage? Every word was a hammer blow to Nathaniel's already crumbling ego. He had no defense. There was nothing to say. Richard leaned back, his decision made. This is what happens now. You will be suspended from your duties as COO effective immediately. Your corporate accounts will be frozen. Your access to the company jet and vehicles is revoked. You will vacate the Greenwich house by the end of the day. You can stay at the city apartment for now. We will speak again when I decide you've remembered what it means to be a man. Father, no, Nathaniel pleaded, jolted into action. The board, my reputation. You should have thought of your reputation when you abdicated your role as a husband and a father, Richard retorted coldly. Get out of my office. Defeated Nathaniel rose and walked out, his shoulders slumped. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Richard alone once more. He took no pleasure in his son's humiliation, only a deep, weary sadness. The boy was broken molded by Genevieve into a weak-willed accessory for her social climbing. Now for the Queen herself. He returned to the Greenwich estate that evening. The house felt different, tainted. Genevieve was in the drawing room, arranging flowers, humming softly to herself. She had re-established her domain. Standing near the fireplace, looking perfectly at home, was a striking brunette woman whom Richard vaguely recognized from society pages. Richard, darling, you're home, Genevieve greeted him, smiling brightly. You remember Victoria Vance, don't you? She was just stopping by to offer her support to Nathaniel. Such a dear. Victoria offered a polite, predatory smile. Mr. Sterling, it's a pleasure to see you again. I was just telling Genevieve how sorry I was to hear of Nathaniel's troubles. Richard ignored her completely. His gaze was locked on his wife. Miss Vance, if you'll excuse us, I need to speak with my wife privately. His tone left no room for argument. Victoria Vance, sensing the shift in temperature, quickly made her excuses and departed. The moment she was gone, Genevieve's smile faltered. Richard, what's wrong? You're being rude. Save it, Genevieve, he said, his voice flat. He tossed the folder from Finch onto the coffee table, right where the faked photos had been. It's all in there. The payments to the PI, the digital artist you hired, the lies you told me, the lies you told our son. Genevieve's face turned ashen. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. But I think what disgusts me most," Richard continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "is that you knew she was pregnant. You knew, and you did it anyway. You were willing to orphan my grandchild before he was even born, all for what? To replace a daughter-in-law you deemed unsuitable with that vacuous socialite who just left to preserve your pathetic illusion of a perfect bloodline." He walked over to the window, looking out at the perfectly manicured gardens. "You have mistaken my delegation for apathy for far too long, Genevieve. You have managed my homes, but you do not manage my family. You do not dictate my legacy. And you most certainly do not threaten my blood. I did it for us, for this family." She finally choked out, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. She was an outsider, a nobody. She wasn't right for us. "You did it for you," Richard corrected her, turning back to face her. His expression was utterly devoid of warmth. "And in doing so, you have fractured this family in a way you cannot possibly comprehend. You have shown me a capacity for cruelty I can no longer abide under my roof. I will be meeting with my lawyers tomorrow. This marriage, as far as I am concerned, is over." The finality in his voice was absolute. Genevieve Sterling, the untouchable queen of society, the matriarch of the Sterling dynasty, finally understood. She hadn't just made a mistake. She had picked a fight with the one person in her world who had the power to take everything away from her, and she had lost. Richard Sterling's revenge was never going to be a loud theatrical affair. He was a man who moved markets with a quiet phone call, who dismantled competitors with surgical precision. Not a sledgehammer. His retribution against his wife and son would be conducted with the same cold, calculating efficiency. It would be a symphony of consequences orchestrated by a master conductor. His first and most important move was to find Isabella. Chloe Davis's fourth-floor walk-up in Astoria was an unlikely setting for a meeting with a billionaire. When the buzzer rang, Chloe answered with her usual suspicion. "Who is it?" "My name is Richard Sterling." The voice came through the intercom, calm and measured. "I am Isabella's father-in-law. I would like to speak with her. I'm alone, and I come in peace." Chloe and Isabella exchanged a wide-eyed, panicked look. Chloe's protective instincts flared. "Not a chance, buddy. You people have done enough." "Please," the voice said, and for the first time a note of something other than command crept in. It sounded like regret. "I know what my wife and son have done. I am here to make it right. For her, and for my grandchild." Isabella, who had been listening with a hand on her stomach, made a decision. "Let him in, Chloe." Chloe hesitated, then buzzed him up, standing by the door, with her arms crossed, ready for a fight. When Richard Sterling appeared at the doorway, he looked smaller than he did in photographs, and infinitely more tired. He wore a simple grey suit, no tie. He looked at the small, cluttered apartment, then at Isabella, who was sitting on the sofa, wrapped in Chloe's fleece blanket. His gaze was filled with a deep, unmistakable remorse. "Isabella," he said, his voice quiet, "I don't have the words to properly express how sorry I am for the actions of my family. What was done to you was monstrous and unforgivable." He didn't make excuses. He didn't try to explain away Genevieve's or Nathaniel's behavior. He owned it. "I have come here today for 2 reasons," he continued, remaining in the doorway, giving her space. "First, to offer you my sincerest apology, and second, to offer you my unconditional and absolute support in whatever form you choose to accept it." Isabella studied him. She had seen him as a distant, powerful figure, an extension of the cold Sterling Empire. Now she saw a man grappling with a profound failure within his own family. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why now?" "Because I just found out the truth," he said simply. "And because you are the mother of my grandchild. That makes you family. My family. And I do not abandon my family." Over the next hour, he laid out the facts. He told her what he had discovered, how he had confronted Nathaniel, and his intentions regarding Genevieve. He wasn't asking her to come back to the mansion or to forgive his son. He was offering her resources. "I have already opened a trust in your name and a separate one for the child. You will never have to worry about money again," he explained. "I have the best medical team on standby for you. I have located a beautiful brownstone in Park Slope that I would like to purchase for you and the baby, if you like it. And I have retained the services of the most formidable divorce attorney in New York City on your behalf. You will dictate the terms. Nathaniel will comply." Isabella was stunned into silence. This wasn't what she expected. She had been steeling herself for a fight, a long, ugly battle for legitimacy for her child. Instead, she was being handed an arsenal. "I don't want your money, Richard," she said, finding her voice. He nodded, understanding. "I know. This isn't about the money. It's about security. It's about justice, but I ask you to accept it, not as a handout, but as the first of many reparations that are owed to you. Use it to build a life for yourself and my grandchild, a life far away from the poison of my house." She looked at Chloe, who gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. This was real. This was power being handed back to her. "On one condition," Isabella said, her spine straightening. "This isn't just about me. Genevieve and Nathaniel can't just get away with a slap on the wrist. People need to know what they did." A grim smile touched Richard's lips. "I assure you their consequences are just beginning." He was true to his word. The very next day, the second phase of his plan went into effect, the financial and social annihilation. An internal memo at Sterling Global announced that Nathaniel Sterling was taking an indefinite leave of absence for personal reasons, effective immediately. His name was removed from the company letterhead. His corporate credit cards were declined at a 5-star restaurant where he was trying to have lunch with a stunned Victoria Vance. Humiliation was the opening salvo. For Genevieve, the attack was more subtle and far more devastating. Richard didn't need a tabloid. He had a more powerful weapon. He was a major benefactor to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the New York Philharmonic, and a dozen other high society charities where Genevieve held prestigious board positions. He made a series of quiet calls. He didn't issue threats. He simply expressed his deep disappointment in his wife's recent ethical lapses, and suggested that her continued presence on these boards might compromise their integrity and, by extension, future Sterling donations. The effect was instantaneous. One by one, the calls came in. The chair of the museum board reluctantly accepted her resignation. The head of the Philharmonic Gala Committee suggested she might want to sit this season out. Her social circle, a fragile ecosystem built on power and proximity to wealth, evaporated overnight. Friends who had fawned over her for years suddenly didn't return her calls. She was being erased from the world she had so meticulously built. Isabella, meanwhile, was moving into the beautiful sun-drenched brownstone in Brooklyn. It was a home, not a showroom. It had a small garden in the back, perfect for a child. With the resources Richard had provided and Chloe's encouragement, she began to lay the groundwork for a small art consultancy firm specializing in private acquisitions. She was reclaiming her identity not as Mrs. Sterling, but as Isabella Rossi. She had agreed to let Richard's lawyers handle the divorce. She didn't want a war. She wanted a swift, clean amputation. But she had made one thing clear to them: Nathaniel would have no automatic parental rights. He would have to earn them. Richard Sterling had not only given her a shield, he had handed her a sword, and as she stood in the empty room that would become her baby's nursery, feeling the first real kick from within, she knew she was ready to use it. The age of being a victim was over. The fallout was as swift as it was brutal. The world that Genevieve and Nathaniel Sterling had inhabited didn't crumble. It vanished like a mirage in the desert. Nathaniel's descent was the most pathetic. Stripped of his title, his expense account, and his father's approval, he was a ghost haunting the edges of a life he no longer owned. His fair-weather friends, the ones who had clapped him on the back at exclusive clubs and laughed at his mediocre jokes, now looked right through him. He was no longer the heir apparent. He was just a man in a borrowed suit. The final predictable blow came from Victoria Vance. She had attached herself to the COO of Sterling Global, a man with a limitless trust fund and a direct line to one of the world's great fortunes. What she was left with was a suspended employee living in a company-owned apartment. She met him for one last drink at a bar in the West Village, far from their usual haunts. "I just think we need some space, Nate," she said, stirring her cocktail with a perfectly manicured finger. "This is all just so messy. I have my own reputation to consider." Reputation. Nathaniel scoffed a bitter, unfamiliar sound. "You mean your prospects? My father cut me off Victoria. The money's gone." Her mask of feigned sympathy dropped, replaced by a cold, appraising look. "Well," she said, standing and smoothing her dress, "that is a shame. I hope you sort things out." She didn't look back as she walked out of the bar, leaving him alone with the bill. He wasn't sure he could pay. Her departure was the final confirmation of his irrelevance. He wasn't a person to her. He was a position, and the position was now vacant. Genevieve's isolation was more profound, a chilling portrait of poetic justice. She was trapped in the 30,000-square-foot Greenwich mansion, a queen reigning over an empty kingdom. The household staff, loyal to the man who signed their paychecks, treated her with a frigid, correct politeness that was more unnerving than open hostility. The silence in the vast hallways was deafening, broken only by the ticking of antique clocks counting down the moments of her gilded imprisonment. Her phone, once a constant source of invitations and gossip, remained silent. Her charities had disavowed her. Her social rivals whispered about her downfall with schadenfreude over lunch at St. Ambroios. They said she'd finally gone too far, that her cruelty had caught up with her. She had built her entire identity on the foundation of the Sterling name and its accompanying social power. With Richard's support withdrawn, she discovered her identity was as hollow as a Faberge egg, beautiful on the outside, but empty within. The final confrontation with Richard took place in the very drawing room where she had condemned Isabella. He didn't come to argue. He came with his lawyer to deliver the terms of their separation. "You can keep the house," Richard said, his tone devoid of any emotion, "and I will provide you with an allowance sufficient to live comfortably. But you will be cut off from all Sterling corporate assets. Your name will be removed from all family trusts. You will sign this post-nuptial agreement, which includes an ironclad non-disclosure clause regarding all family and business matters, or the allowance will be rescinded and I will sell the house." "You can't do this to me, Richard," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "After 40 years of marriage. I built this life with you. No," Richard replied, his gaze unwavering. I built an empire. You decorated it, and you allowed your vanity to threaten its future. You threatened my grandchild. That is a line you do not cross. This is not a negotiation, Genevieve. It is a statement of fact. He stood to leave. The papers will be filed tomorrow. Your lawyers can speak to mine. As he walked away, Genevieve finally broke. Her carefully constructed facade shattered, and she let out a raw, guttural sob of rage and despair. She had played the game of social chess her entire life, and she had just been checkmated by the one piece on the board she always took for granted. While their world imploded, Isabella's was being built brick by brick on a new and solid foundation. The Park Slope brownstone was filled with light and life. Chloe was a constant supportive presence, helping her pick out furniture and paint colors for the nursery. Isabella's art advisory was no longer just an idea. It had a name, a business license, and its first client, a tech mogul Richard had discreetly referred to her. She was rediscovering the woman she was before she became Mrs. Sterling. She spent her days in museums and galleries, her mind sharp and engaged. The work gave her purpose, a sense of self-worth that had nothing to do with a famous last name. She met with her obstetrician regularly, no longer in the sterile, high-end clinic Genevieve had insisted upon, but with a warm, caring doctor in Brooklyn who spoke to her as a person, not a vessel for a dynasty. Her meetings with her divorce lawyer were brief and businesslike. She didn't ask for a punitive settlement. The trusts Richard had established were more than enough. Her only demands were non-negotiable, full legal and physical custody of her child. Nathaniel could petition for visitation rights after the birth, but they would be at her discretion and would be supervised until he could prove he was a stable and positive influence. It was not an act of revenge, but of protection. She was a mother bear guarding her cub. One crisp autumn afternoon, sitting in the half-finished nursery and watching the leaves fall in her small garden, Isabella felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She was free. The pain of Nathaniel's betrayal still lingered, a dull ache in her heart. But it was no longer the defining feature of her existence. It was a scar, not an open wound. The symphony of consequences that Richard had orchestrated had provided a stark and satisfying justice, but her real victory wasn't their downfall. It was her own ascent. She was building a life of her own, making for herself and for the child who would soon fill it with a new kind of music. Winter thawed into a vibrant New York spring. 6 months after she had walked out of the Sterling mansion into the pouring rain, Isabella Rossi walked out of a Brooklyn hospital into the brilliant sunshine, cradling her newborn son, Leo Rossi. He was perfect, with a shock of dark hair like hers, and she thought with a pang she quickly dismissed his father's blue eyes. But his name was hers. He would be raised on her terms, defined by her strength, not by the tarnished legacy of his father's family. Waiting for her at the curb was not a chauffeur-driven limousine, but Richard Sterling himself, driving a discreet but comfortable SUV. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper, but there was a light in them she had never seen before. When he saw Leo, his formidable composure melted away, replaced by the unabashed, foolish grin of a new grandfather. "He's a Sterling, all right," Richard said softly, his voice thick with emotion as he gently touched the baby's cheek. "He has that determined look." "He's a Rossi," Isabella corrected him gently but with a smile. "But I suppose he can have a little Sterling determination." Their relationship had transformed into something remarkable and unexpected. He was a constant, steady presence in her life. He never offered unsolicited advice, never overstepped. He was simply there, a source of quiet support, a guardian angel in a bespoke suit. He had become the father she never had, and in her and Leo, he had found a new purpose beyond the boardroom, a chance to build a family legacy based on love and respect, rather than power and fear. The divorce from Nathaniel was finalized with a quiet signature. There were no headlines, no messy court battles. Richard's power had ensured it. Nathaniel, humbled and forced into therapy by his father as a condition of receiving a modest living stipend, had begun the long, arduous process of self-reflection. A few weeks after Leo's birth, he called Isabella. "I know I have no right to ask for anything," he said, his voice stripped of its old, easy arrogance. "But I was hoping I would like to see my son." Isabella took a deep breath. "The first visit will be at my house. Your father will be here. You can stay for 1 hour. And, Nathaniel, this is not for you. It's for Leo. He deserves the chance to know his father, but he also deserves to be protected. You will have to earn his trust, and you will have to earn mine." It was a start. Not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but a path forward. She would never allow the toxicity of the past to poison her son's future, but she also wouldn't let her own pain deny Leo a relationship with his father, should Nathaniel prove himself worthy of one. Genevieve Sterling remained a ghost in her Greenwich palace. The divorce had left her a wealthy woman, but a profoundly impoverished one. She was adrift in a sea of empty rooms and bitter regrets. The society she worshipped had exiled her and her son, whom she had tried to control, now barely spoke to her, blaming her for his downfall. She had won her battle against Isabella, but in doing so had lost the entire war, sacrificing her son's happiness, her marriage, and her place in the world for the sake of a pride that now tasted like ash in her mouth. Life in the Park Slope brownstone was full. It was a place of warmth, laughter, and the scent of baby powder. Chloe was a fixture the proudest of aunts, showering Leo with books and affection. Richard visited every Sunday for what he called board meetings with the CEO, which consisted of him holding Leo and making quiet, happy noises. One sunny afternoon, Isabella was in the garden rocking Leo in her arms. Richard was there watching them with a peaceful expression. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "for decades I thought building a legacy was about steel and concrete, stock prices and market share. I spent my life acquiring things." He looked at Leo sleeping soundly in Isabella's arms. "I was wrong. This," he said, his voice filled with a quiet reverence, "this is a foundation. Everything else is just scaffolding." Isabella looked down at her son, her heart swelling with a fierce, protective love. The storm had passed. The ruins of her old life were far behind her. Here in this small garden, with her child in her arms and an unlikely ally by her side, she had not just survived. She had built something new, something stronger and more real than any gilded cage. A home, a family, a future, and it was all hers. That's the incredible journey of Isabella Rossi, a story that proves that true power isn't about wealth or a famous last name, but about resilience, integrity, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. She was cast out and betrayed, left with nothing, but she found her strength not in revenge, but in building a new life on her own terms. She turned a devastating betrayal into a story of empowerment and created a new kind of family founded on love and respect. What do you think about Richard's form of justice? Was it too harsh, or exactly what Genevieve and Nathaniel deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of justice and resilience resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life dramas where the truth always finds its way to the light. Thanks for listening.
Billionaire thought she was in a coma until his pregnant wife logged into his bank account. Have you ever heard a secret so shocking it sent tremors through an entire family? This story is no ordinary tale of wealth and jealousy. It's a swirl of hidden identities, breathtaking deceit, and a pregnant wife's startling discovery in her millionaire husband's bank account. When James Harrington, a wealthy entrepreneur in London's high society, believed his mistress lay in a coma, he thought his perfect life would remain neatly under wraps. But a single login by his pregnant wife, Elizabeth, unleashed a storm of buried truths. Brace yourselves. This unfolding drama will drag you through betrayal, obsession, and desperate ambitions gone terribly awry. James Harrington was the sort of man people either idolized or envied. Tall, confident, and impeccably dressed, James came from old money but built even greater wealth on his own. He was known to sign deals that turned entire industries on their heads. In some circles, he was referred to as the Golden Touch because anything he invested in thrived. Paparazzi flashed their cameras at him when he emerged from charity galas. Business journalists devoted countless articles to his strategies. He had not just one penthouse in London's upscale Mayfair district, but also a sprawling estate in the English countryside. Yet behind this glamorous front lurk secrets few knew. The public witnessed the perfect facade, a self-made millionaire married to a poised wife, Elizabeth Harrington, who was glowing with pregnancy. To outsiders, the couple seemed an ideal match, two successful, refined individuals whose union promised a bright future. Elizabeth came from a respectable lineage as well. Her father, Sir Edmund Blackwood, was a renowned heart surgeon who had saved lives in the highest circles of power. She embodied elegance and dignity, an expectant mother with her feet planted firmly in the realm of polite society. On a chilly autumn afternoon, the Harringtons hosted a charity luncheon at their estate. The property, called Rosemore Manor, was an old-world country house enveloped by acres of manicured gardens. Guests arrived in luxury cars, stepping out in sophisticated suits and dresses. Everyone marveled at the curated rose garden, the symmetrical hedges, and the tranquil fountain in the courtyard. Among the guests was Michael Bingham, James's longtime friend, who had also served as best man at their wedding. There was Lady Catherine Stewart, a well-known patron of the arts, sporting an elegant brooch rumoured to be worth a small fortune. Finally, there was Alexandra Lexi Delacroix, a rising fashion designer who had James as her silent financial backer. Elizabeth entertained guests, her smile radiant, exuding warmth that made everyone feel welcome. It was a picture of marital and social bliss. Yet, through the polite conversation, the popping champagne corks, and the hushed talk of philanthropic pursuits, a nervous flicker in James's eyes surfaced each time his phone buzzed in his pocket. He would discreetly check the message, then stuff the phone back in his jacket with a stiff expression. Something beyond the scope of perfect hospitality gnawed at him. As the event continued, Elizabeth's eyes narrowed slightly each time James grew tense at a text. She was no fool. She sensed an unease in her husband. But it was easy enough to mistake it for stress about business deals or something to do with the brand new software venture James was launching. Little did she know, those messages had nothing to do with software or philanthropic commitments. Instead, They were updates concerning a young woman named Cassandra Delgado, a woman whose existence was carefully shielded from Elizabeth. A woman James believed to be in a coma at a private hospital across town. Cassandra Delgado was a name known only to a select few in James's circle: his personal assistant, Victoria Mills, and a private doctor, Dr. Alan Friedman, employed to watch over Cassandra's health. James had met Cassandra 6 months earlier at a finance conference in Paris, ironically the same weekend Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant. Cassandra was not just another fling. She was a brilliant equity analyst who had enthralled him with her wit and sharp insight about European markets. Their conversations had sparked a potent attraction James couldn't resist. Their affair played out in secret rendezvous, discreet hotel suites in foreign cities, late-night dinners at restaurants known for their absolute confidentiality, and impassioned weekends in James's private chalet in the Alps. For a while, it was simply a thrilling romance. Cassandra wasn't content to be just a mistress. She was ambitious. She challenged James's decisions in business, questioned his philanthropic methods, and occasionally even criticized how he balanced personal responsibilities. There was a level of engagement and unpredictability that mesmerized him, but then the fateful accident occurred. Cassandra was returning from an investment conference in Geneva when her car skidded on a patch of black ice and slammed into a guardrail. The crash left her with severe head trauma. She was rushed to a private clinic in London, where James footed the astronomical medical bills. The doctors placed her in an induced coma to help her recover from swelling in her brain. Initially, James feared that if his wife discovered Cassandra or her expensive care, everything he had worked for his marriage, his carefully curated public image, would come crashing down. And so James orchestrated a cover-up that was as elaborate as it was callous. He paid Dr. Friedman and the clinic's administration handsomely to keep Cassandra's presence off any public records. Using shell companies, he transferred funds to the clinic each month, ensuring top-notch care. To the outside world, Cassandra Delgado had practically vanished. Cassandra's friends assumed she had gone off the grid, perhaps traveling or shifting jobs. James had confiscated her phone and personal belongings, feeding bits of misinformation wherever necessary. In his mind, James told himself that paying for her care was the right thing to do. He rationalized that he was protecting both Cassandra and Elizabeth, safeguarding them from scandal. Guilt for the accident gnawed at him, though logically he knew he had not caused her to drive on that cursed patch of ice. Still, had it not been for his encouragement, she might never have rushed to catch that late-night flight from Geneva. More than guilt, though, James was driven by fear of exposure. When he received daily updates that Cassandra lay comatose, stable yet unresponsive, he felt a twisted sense of relief. He convinced himself that, for the moment, the problem was contained, allowing him to keep living his life as the perfect husband and soon-to-be father. He never dared visit Cassandra in person for fear someone, maybe a nurse or a random onlooker, would recognize him. No, he planned to wait until after Elizabeth gave birth, after the dust settled, to figure out how to handle Cassandra's eventual recovery. He'd pay for her rehabilitation, give her a handsome settlement if necessary. Then she would disappear from his life. That was James's plan until it all unraveled. 2 weeks after the charity luncheon, Elizabeth was about 6 months pregnant. Her morning sickness had subsided, leaving her more energetic. She filled her days with prenatal yoga classes and working with interior designers to perfect the nursery at Rosemore Manor. Pale yellow walls, hand-painted murals of whimsical animals, plush carpets shipped from Turkey, nothing but the best for the awaited heir or heiress to the Harrington fortune. As for James, he was flying under the radar, busily ensuring the final touches on his new tech project. a software suite that promised to revolutionize data analytics in the finance world. He spent days locked in high-level meetings and nights locked in his office, answering calls from Dr. Friedman about Cassandra's condition. Then, one evening at Rosemore Manor, the landline rang. Elizabeth, sipping herbal tea, answered. The person on the other line was Dr. Friedman, using the private number he wasn't meant to dial without explicit instruction. Panicking, Friedman said, "Hello, this is an urgent message for Mr. Harrington. May I speak to him?" "It's about the patient, Cassandra Delgado." Elizabeth froze, confusion swirling in her mind. Why was a doctor calling the house line about someone named Cassandra Delgado? She gathered herself quickly. "I'm sorry, Dr. Friedman, did you say? My husband is busy. Can you tell me what this is about?" Flustered, Friedman stammered something about a misdial, then hung up abruptly. Elizabeth set the receiver down slowly, her heart pounding. Cassandra Delgado. The name meant nothing to her. Yet the mention of patient roused a storm of questions. She marched into James's study, where he was poring over financial reports. "You had a call," she said, voice tight with concern. "Dr. Friedman. He mentioned something about a patient named Cassandra Delgado." James's face went ashen. In that split second, Elizabeth saw the flicker of guilt, fear, and something she recognized as panic. He tried to cover it with a laugh. "Cassandra Delgado? I've never heard of her. Probably a telemarketer or scam call. Let me see if I can find out." He gently maneuvered Elizabeth out of his study and closed the door. She stood outside, heart pounding. Something was off. Telemarketers didn't usually identify themselves as doctors discussing a patient. And James's behavior was telling. She wasn't sure what she suspected, but she felt an uneasy stirring in the pit of her stomach. Perhaps the stress of pregnancy heightened her intuition. She resolved to watch James more carefully. The next day, James departed early for a business trip to Berlin, at least. That's what he told Elizabeth. In reality, he was meeting with Dr. Friedman at a hidden clinic in London. Tucked away on a quiet street in Kensington, this clinic catered to high-profile clients who wanted absolute privacy. James slipped through a side entrance, wearing a cap and dark sunglasses. In a dimly lit office, Dr. Friedman looked uneasy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. I had an emergency last night. Cassandra had a sudden fever. I was trying to reach you on your private cell. When it went to voicemail, I thought I'd try the home number. I didn't realize your wife would pick up." James glowered. "We can't have any more mistakes, Friedman. If my wife finds out about Cassandra, everything I've built could implode. But more importantly, how is Cassandra's condition?" Friedman exhaled nervously. "She's improving. She's been stirring more, responding to stimuli. There's a possibility she could come out of the coma sooner than we anticipated." That news, which should have been cause for celebration, filled James with dread. That's good," he forced himself to say. "Keep me updated. Make sure no one visits her. I'll handle the finances, but I can't be seen here often." Dr. Friedman nodded. "Of course, Mr. Harrington. I'll keep everything confidential." Returning to his car, James was overcome by a swirl of worry. If Cassandra regained consciousness, what story would she tell? Would she accuse him of abandoning her? Of a cover-up? She could demand money. Or maybe she'd keep quiet if he paid her enough. He tried to quell his anxiety by reminding himself that he was still in control. After all, he had connections, he had wealth. He would find a way out of this. Back at Rosemore Manor, Elizabeth's day took a fateful turn. She decided to finalize the nursery budget, a seemingly mundane task. Typically, her husband's personal assistant handled financial transactions, but Elizabeth wanted to oversee the details personally. She tried to log into their joint online bank account, but found the password had been changed. Confused, she tried James's usual set of passcodes, birthdays, anniversary dates, random numbers, but nothing worked. Elizabeth frowned. It was peculiar. They had always had open access to each other's accounts. They were a family. Why would James abruptly change their shared password? Her mind flashed back to the phone call from Dr. Friedman. Could the two be connected? She called James only to get his voicemail. This was uncharacteristic, given how quickly he usually responded to her calls. She left a message. "James, it's Elizabeth. I tried to get into our bank account, but it's not letting me. Did you change the password? Please call me. Several hours passed. No return call." Her nerves frayed. Elizabeth rang Michael Bingham, James's old friend and business confidant. Michael seemed taken aback by her worry. "James told me he was dealing with some sensitive business transactions," Michael said. "Maybe that's why he changed the password. Try not to stress. It can't be anything major." But Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was afoot. The next day, she decided to tackle the problem more directly. She drove to Harrington Capital's headquarters, a sleek skyscraper in central London. Inside the labyrinth of glass, walled offices, employees bustled about with hushed urgency. Elizabeth was well known, so the receptionist allowed her to go straight up to James's office on the executive floor. James wasn't there, nor was his assistant. The door was locked. Through the frosted glass, Elizabeth spotted a laptop on the desk. Anxiety gnawed at her. She felt uneasy snooping around, but a stronger need to know the truth compelled her. She reached for the spare key hidden behind a potted plant. She knew of its existence from casual mentions over the years. She entered the office, closed the door behind her, and approached the desk. The laptop was locked, demanding a password. Determined, she tried a variation of significant dates, typed systematically, word by word. Finally, something clicked. The password was the day they found out she was pregnant. The screen unlocked. Elizabeth's heart hammered. She noticed a folder labeled Private Delgado. Confusion roiled. Was Delgado the same name she had heard on the phone? Without hesitating, she clicked it open. A flurry of documents appeared: medical bills, statements from a private clinic, transactions to a doctor, Friedman, and other references to Cassandra Delgado. Terrified and fascinated, Elizabeth skimmed through. Her eyes widened at repeated monthly payments, extraordinarily large sums for a private ward, intensive neurological care, advanced treatment. She covered her mouth as her mind pieced together a horrifying puzzle. Cassandra Delgado was in a private clinic. James was footing the bill. The first payments started about 6 months ago, the same period that coincided with Elizabeth's pregnancy announcement. The medical documents contained phrases like accident, trauma, severe head injury, induced coma. Elizabeth sank into James's desk chair, trembling. Why would her husband pay for a stranger's long-term hospital care? Why was everything so secretive? She stared at the bank transactions, noticing that they originated from a separate account in James's name, one she had never heard of before, an account that had shockingly high balances. The next evening, James returned home from his business trip, expecting a serene mansion and a warm welcome from his pregnant wife. Instead, he found Elizabeth in the lounge, perched on the edge of a sofa, her hands clasped over her belly as though shielding the baby from some intangible threat. A thick file of printouts rested beside her. "We need to talk," she said, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "Who is Cassandra Delgado? Why are you sending thousands of pounds a month to pay for her care in a private clinic?" James's composure wavered. He had practiced 100 possible cover stories during his drive back, but Elizabeth's furious gaze shredded his mental scripts. He tried to deflect, to spin a narrative about charity or philanthropic responsibility. But Elizabeth cut him off with a tremor in her voice. "Don't lie to me." Realizing he could no longer feign innocence, James offered a curated version of the truth. He told her that Cassandra was a talented consultant he had been working with. that she got into a serious accident. He felt responsible because she was returning from a work trip on his behalf. So, out of guilt and duty, he covered her medical bills. Elizabeth listened, tears brimming. "And you had to hide it from me? Create a secret account, password protect everything? Pay off a doctor to keep it all quiet? That doesn't sound like a normal sense of responsibility. That sounds like an affair, James." He hesitated. The truth was that while Elizabeth was perceptive, she didn't know every detail yet. A wave of self-preservation overcame him. He tried to placate her with half-truths. "We got close while working together, but it was a lapse in judgment. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out. I was going to handle it myself." Elizabeth's tears spilled. "You betrayed me while I've been pregnant with our child. I've stood by you, loved you, given you my trust." She clutched her abdomen as though feeling the baby's presence more acutely. "I can't believe you'd do this. You've left me humiliated, James." In that moment, James realized how fragile his fortress was. For all his wealth and cunning, he had failed to keep his double life hidden. The love and respect that once bound them seemed to fracture before his eyes. He reached out to Elizabeth, but she shrank away, tears cutting sharp lines down her cheeks. "This marriage," she said, voice trembling, "is standing on very thin ice. If I discover anything else you're hiding, any more lies, I will walk away from you for good, and you will not see this child." With that, she retired to her bedroom, leaving James alone, the flickering fireplace reflecting the turmoil in his mind. He felt the pang of losing control, fear of losing the woman he still cared for, perhaps more than he realized. Yet, in the swirling chaos, he also felt the haunting presence of Cassandra, the mistress who might awaken any day. If Elizabeth discovered the depth of his involvement with her, the entire house of cards would topple. 2 days later, Elizabeth confided in her father, Sir Edmund Blackwood. Over tea in her father's study, tears running down her cheeks, she explained the situation in broad strokes, omitting certain details that made her feel ashamed. Sir Edmund listened gravely, his brow furrowed. "I had a sense James was not the type to lead a straightforward life," Sir Edmund said, kindly but firmly. "He's brilliant, driven, but also secretive. There's a reason his success soared so quickly." Elizabeth wiped her eyes. "I still love him, Dad, but I need the whole truth. If I can't trust him, how can I raise a child with him?" Sir Edmund placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Then find the truth. You're strong. You have resources. Use them." Spurred by her father's encouragement, Elizabeth decided to dig deeper. She wanted to confirm James's story that Cassandra Delgado had been a consultant for his firm and was now comatose. If that was all there was to it, an affair plus guilt, could she handle it? Possibly. But if James was hiding more, she had to know. So she hired a private investigator named Daniel Pendleton, famed for discretion and thoroughness. Pendleton pulled phone records, scoured flight manifests, and discreetly interviewed staff at Harrington Capital. The puzzle that formed was more damning than Elizabeth feared. James and Cassandra had been spotted in Paris, Rome, and the Swiss Alps, all at times that overlapped suspiciously with James's business trips. They had shared hotel suites, and Cassandra was seen wearing expensive jewelry that James must have gifted her. Even more disturbing was how meticulously James had orchestrated Cassandra's disappearance from public records after her accident. Pendleton uncovered a hidden web of shell companies channeling money into the private clinic, proving that James was funneling large sums to keep Cassandra's condition out of official hospital databases. Elizabeth's heartbreak deepened. It wasn't merely an affair, it was a labyrinth of lies, spanning at least 6 months. She felt betrayed, but a quiet, steely resolve took hold of her heart. She wasn't just a wife or a victim, she was the daughter of a knighted surgeon, a soon-to-be mother, a woman who deserved respect. She planned her next move carefully. If James insisted on subterfuge, then she would meet with Cassandra Delgado herself. And if Cassandra remained in a coma, perhaps Elizabeth would glean enough from medical staff to piece together the missing fragments. Under the guise of a routine obstetrics appointment in London, Elizabeth slipped away to Kensington and found the private clinic that Dr. Friedman ran. Using a fabricated story about being referred for a consultation, she convinced a young nurse that she needed to see Dr. Friedman. The nurse led Elizabeth down a hallway lined with glossy paintings of pastoral scenes. A subtle hush lingered in the corridors. When Dr. Friedman saw Elizabeth, he seemed to blanch. "Miss S. Harrington, this is unexpected. How can I help you?" Elizabeth, trembling with a mixture of fear and determination, said, "I know my husband is paying you to treat Cassandra Delgado. I want to see her. I have the right to know what's going on." Friedman tried to maintain composure, but sweat gathered on his brow. "Miss S. Harrington, this is highly irregular. I'm bound by patient confidentiality." Elizabeth's gaze sharpened. "Is the confidentiality greater than the hush money you're receiving from my husband? Because I promise you, if you don't let me see her, I will expose every financial transaction. I will drag this clinic and your name through every court in London." Flustered, Friedman hesitated. Finally, with trembling reluctance, he led Elizabeth to a small, private room. The beep of monitoring devices and the hush of ventilators filled the air. On the bed lay a young woman with bandages wrapped around her head and the fourth line in her arm. Her eyes were closed, her expression strangely serene amidst the medical machinery. Elizabeth approached the bed, heart pounding. Cassandra Delgado was beautiful, even in her vulnerable state. High cheekbones, long lashes, and an aura of intelligence in the lines of her face. Elizabeth's anger wavered into a wave of pity. Is this the woman James had risked everything for? "Yes, that's Cassandra Delgado," Friedman murmured. "She was in a severe accident. We had her in an induced coma for months. Recently, we began reducing sedation. There are signs of improvement, but it's slow." Elizabeth's throat tightened. A swirl of conflicting emotions arose: hurt, jealousy, compassion. She gently touched Cassandra's hand. It was warm. For a fleeting moment she wondered, did Cassandra love James? Did James truly love her? Or was this all just a reckless fling? She turned back to Friedman. "Will she recover?" He nodded hesitantly. "We're hopeful. There's still swelling in her brain, but she started to show reflex responses. She could wake up in days or weeks. Hard to predict. Sometimes patients need months of rehabilitation." Elizabeth swallowed hard. The knowledge that Cassandra might soon awaken brought a new kind of dread. If this woman regained consciousness, she might reveal every sordid detail of the affair. Elizabeth braced herself for an uncertain future, but she also felt a strange sense of power. She had seen Cassandra. This was no phantom mistress. She was a flesh and blood woman who might hold the key to unraveling James's carefully curated world of secrets. That evening, Elizabeth returned to Rosemore Manor and found James pacing in the study, his tie loosened, hair disheveled. He had apparently learned from Friedman about her visit to the clinic. The moment she stepped inside, James stormed toward her. "What were you thinking going there? Barging in on Friedman? You don't understand the damage you could cause." His anger ignited hers. "Oh, I understand plenty. I understand you had an extended affair, that you orchestrated a cover-up, that you funneled money through sham accounts to keep her out of sight. I understand you lied to me while I'm carrying your child." James's face contorted with guilt and frustration. "I never meant to hurt you. I was going to end it. Cassandra's accident changed everything. I felt responsible. Responsible or cornered?" Elizabeth shot back. "You could have told me the truth." Instead, you lied and lied, expecting me to remain in the dark while you played savior to your mistress. James's anger deflated. He sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. I can't undo it. I panicked. I was afraid to lose you, to lose my family, my reputation. She stood before him, arms folded protectively across her chest. Well, here we are now. I'm not sure what to do. I've considered leaving you, but we have a child on the way. Do I want our baby to grow up without a father? Tears welled in James's eyes. I love you. I genuinely do. The affair was a catastrophic mistake. I tried to fix it. If you need me to sign anything, to put your name on all the accounts, to do whatever it takes to prove my loyalty, I will. Just don't leave me. Elizabeth watched him, pained. For all his wealth and brilliance, he suddenly looked small and pathetic. Part of her wanted to comfort him. The other part bristled at the notion of rewarding his deception. We'll figure it out, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. But from now on, no more secrets. That includes Cassandra Delgado, especially if she wakes up. Days passed. Elizabeth tried to maintain normalcy, focusing on her pregnancy and the daily rhythms of life at Rosemore Manor. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface. She avoided James as much as civility allowed, speaking to him only about baby necessities or household matters. At night, she stayed in a separate bedroom, unable to share the same bed with a man she felt she no longer recognized. Then, one morning, Dr. Friedman called. This time he reached Elizabeth on her cell phone by design, at her request. Miss S. Harrington, he said, his voice urgent, Cassandra Delgado has emerged from her coma. She's awake. Elizabeth's heart lurched. She thanked Friedman and hung up, shock waves rippling through her. She found James in his study. He looked up, wary. What's wrong? She bit her lip. Cassandra's awake. His face paled. When did this happen? Apparently, sometime late last night. She's conscious, though probably confused and fragile. James stood, restless. I need to handle this. She might. Elizabeth lifted her chin. She might what? Expose you? Tell people the truth? He shook his head. I can't just abandon her. She was part of my life. But if I go there and someone sees me, the press, Elizabeth drew a calming breath. You orchestrated this for months. You can't hide behind fear now. If you want to talk to her, then do it. But I'm going with you. James looked startled. What? Why? Elizabeth's voice wavered but held firm. Because if you think I'm going to let you have a private little meeting with the woman you cheated on me with, you're dead wrong. If this marriage stands a chance, I need transparency, complete transparency. James reluctantly agreed. Within the hour, they arrived at the private clinic. Doctor Friedman led them to Cassandra's room, cautioning them that she was weak and disoriented. There, on the bed, Cassandra lay with her eyes partially open, an expression of confusion etched on her face. When they entered, Cassandra's gaze fluttered between them. Her voice, rasped by disuse, barely rose above a whisper. James? Where am I? James approached her, hesitantly taking her hand. You're in a private clinic in Kensington. You had an accident, a car crash. Her eyes searched the unfamiliar surroundings. I remember driving. Then impact. She looked at Elizabeth, perplexed. Who is she? James swallowed. This is my wife, Elizabeth. A flicker of realization or heartbreak flared in Cassandra's eyes. Your wife, she repeated softly, her voice thick with emotion. She tried to raise her body, but tubes and a sense of weakness held her down. What's happening? Why am I here? James, what have you done? Elizabeth stepped forward. He's been paying for your care. You've been in a coma for months. I only found out a short while ago. Cassandra's eyes brimmed with tears. A coma? So everything is real. Her gaze turned to James with an agonized confusion. You promised me a future. I told you I didn't want to be someone's secret. And now your wife is here. You lied to me. James winced, unable to hide his shame. Cassandra, I'm sorry. But Cassandra cut him off, her anger giving her a surprising burst of strength. Don't say sorry. You put me here in this locked-up facility. No one could find me or visit me. Did you think I wouldn't wake up, or that I'd vanish? Elizabeth's chest tightened with a pang of pity for the injured woman. But her own anger burned too. I don't know what James promised you, Miss Delgado, but he's my husband. I didn't know you existed. You were hidden from me just like I was hidden from you. Cassandra closed her eyes, tears streaming down. I believed him. He told me he would leave you, that I was the one he truly loved. An anguished sob broke from her. I gave up so much. I nearly died. Elizabeth stiffened at that revelation. Had James pledged to leave her? James frantically shook his head. Cassandra, I said things, but... Cassandra's fury exploded. Don't insult me. You said it again and again. You told me you were trapped in a loveless marriage, that you and Elizabeth only stayed together for the family's sake, that you wanted a divorce after the baby was born. You told me we'd be free to start a life together. Elizabeth felt as though the floor had opened beneath her. She shot James a look of raw betrayal. Is that true? He stammered. It was the heat of the moment. I wasn't thinking straight. I only said it to keep Cassandra from leaving me. Elizabeth's lips quivered in anger and sorrow. So, you promised her a future, all while I was pregnant with your child. And then, once she was out of commission, you never intended for her to be part of your life again. James pressed his hands to his temples. I didn't know what to do. Cassandra turned her face away, sobbing silently. Friedman hovered by the door, alarmed by the escalating tension. Elizabeth inhaled shakily, feeling protective of Cassandra despite her role as James's mistress. The heartbreak in the room felt suffocating. That's enough for today, Elizabeth declared, stepping toward Friedman. She needs rest. I'll ensure the bills remain paid, but from now on, I'll handle it personally. James, let's go. In that moment, Elizabeth assumed a mantle of power neither James nor Cassandra expected. She signaled that she, not James, would control the narrative. She didn't know exactly how things would unfold, but she knew that if she didn't assert her agency, now the chaos would consume her. Back home, Elizabeth stormed out of the car the moment they arrived at the estate. James followed, begging her to give him a chance to explain. Cassandra exaggerated, he argued. I never fully intended to divorce you. I was just caught up. It was an affair, not a new life plan. Elizabeth stared at him, tears burning in her eyes. I can't even look at you. I don't know which is worse, that you betrayed me, or that you used such blatant, manipulative lies on her. Both, I suppose. James pleaded. Elizabeth, the first beg you, don't give up on me. I'll do anything. She exhaled a shaking breath. Then be prepared for consequences. I'm not sure if we can salvage our marriage, but if we do, I'm setting the terms. She retreated to her separate bedroom, leaving James alone with his dread. Days melted into a strange routine. James tried repeatedly to apologize, but Elizabeth refused to speak about the affair. She spent her time finalizing her last trimester medical appointments and consulting with lawyers about her potential options. Meanwhile, she arranged for Cassandra's ongoing treatment, transferring the monthly payments from James's secret account to a new account she created in both her and James's names. If nothing else, it forced James to come to her for every transaction, ensuring she had control. Cassandra's condition improved. Friedman reported that her memory was returning in patchy fragments. The moment she felt strong enough to talk to reporters or lawyers, the scandal could explode. Gossip columns hungrily eyed James Harrington's personal life, suspecting rumors but lacking proof. Elizabeth dreaded a media frenzy, but steeled herself for the possibility. If that happened, she would protect herself and her child. James would have to face the consequences of his deceit. One afternoon, A few weeks after Cassandra regained consciousness, Elizabeth received an urgent call from Friedman. "Miss S. Harrington, Miss Delgado is asking to see you. She says it's important." Elizabeth hesitated, but curiosity and compassion won out. She agreed and soon found herself again by Cassandra's bedside. This time, Cassandra was sitting up, propped against pillows, face pale but alert. She looked at Elizabeth with a quiet intensity. "Thank you for coming," Cassandra began softly. I wanted to apologize. I had no idea James was lying to us both so thoroughly." Elizabeth offered a wry, sad smile. "I suspect he told each of us different stories. We both believed him." Cassandra swallowed hard. "He told me you were controlling cold and that you were only staying with him out of obligation. He said your marriage was over long before we met. But seeing you, hearing everything, I realize he manipulated me. I wanted to hate you for being his wife, but now I see you're also a victim." Elizabeth felt tears welling in her eyes. "I wish things had never come to this, but thank you for your honesty." Cassandra's lips trembled. "He risked my life. He left me in this clinic as though I were some inconvenience. I feel like he tried to erase me once I was no longer useful or fun." Elizabeth nodded, acknowledging the heartbreak. "I don't have an easy answer for you, but I promise you'll receive all the medical care you need. I won't let him abandon you." Cassandra's eyes shone with gratitude. "Thank you. One more thing, I spoke with the doctors. They said the accident might have been less severe if I hadn't rushed that night. James had demanded I meet him in Geneva. In a way, he's directly responsible for why I took those roads so late." Elizabeth pressed her lips together. She felt a pang of sympathy for Cassandra, but also recognized the conversation was edging into legal territory. "I understand," she said quietly. "Do what you must to heal and move forward." Cassandra looked down, tears dripping onto the white hospital sheets. "I plan to. I'm meeting with a lawyer to discuss my options. But please know, I won't do anything to intentionally hurt you or your child. Whatever I do, it's aimed at holding James accountable for what he did to me." Elizabeth's gaze grew distant, imagining the storm that was about to break over James's head. She simply nodded. "I see. Thank you for telling me." Once again at Rosemore Manor, Elizabeth confronted James that evening. "Cassandra is awake, stronger, and speaking to lawyers. She may sue you. I don't know if she can, but she might try." James went pale. "Sue me for what? The accident was not my fault." Elizabeth gave him a bitter look. "She believes you pressured her to travel under unsafe conditions. She also claims you effectively tried to imprison her in that clinic. It's complicated, but with enough evidence, this could become a high-profile case." He shook his head frantically. "This can't happen. My reputation, my deals. I could lose everything." Elizabeth's voice was cold. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before starting an affair and lying to everyone." She paused, then spoke the words that had been forming for weeks. "I've consulted lawyers myself. If I want to, I can file for divorce and likely get custody of our child, considering your moral misconduct and attempts at deception." James's eyes widened in horror. "Elizabeth, please. What about us, our baby?" She swallowed, feeling a deep pain. "Despite everything, part of me still wants our child to have a father. But I refuse to stay in a marriage built on lies. So here's my condition: full honesty financially, emotionally. You will put the estate, the business shares, all your assets into transparent accounts. I want them accessible in case you ever dare lie again. We will sign a post-nuptial agreement stating that if you commit another breach of trust, I have rights to the estate, and you will pay for Cassandra's full recovery with no strings attached." James looked both humbled and frightened. "That's a lot to ask." Elizabeth's laugh was harsh. "You took a lot from me. You took my faith, my sense of security. If you want to be in this marriage and be a father to our baby, you'll do it." He nodded, resigned. "Yes, I'll do it. Just don't leave me." As Elizabeth turned to go, tears brimmed again. She realized her pregnancy hormones were making her even more emotional, but this was real heartbreak. She didn't know if she could ever truly forgive him, but for her child's sake, she was willing to try. In the weeks that followed, James complied with Elizabeth's demands. He met with lawyers, hammered out a postnuptial agreement, and transferred partial ownership of his properties and accounts to Elizabeth. Business partners grumbled. Rumors swirled about the reason behind these abrupt changes. James put out statements claiming he was reorganizing his wealth for estate planning reasons. Meanwhile, Cassandra filed a personal injury lawsuit against James, accusing him of negligence and emotional distress. The tabloids caught wind of it, and soon James's carefully manicured public image began to crumble. Photos surfaced of James with Cassandra in Rome, fueling speculation. The press had a field day, painting him as a philandering millionaire who had driven his mistress into harm's way. Investors raised eyebrows. Stocks for Harrington Capital wavered. Elizabeth found herself in the crosshairs of gossip columns. They labelled her the long-suffering wife, humiliating her further. She shielded herself at Rosemore Manor, focusing on her final weeks of pregnancy. She avoided social media, ignoring the swirling rumours. Her only solace was that the baby was healthy, the doctor said. She often rested in the nursery, rocking in the chair, imagining a simpler future where the child could grow up in a stable household. James, for his part, seemed broken. He spent hours meeting with crisis PR teams, lawyers, and advisors, trying to salvage his reputation. At night, he returned home exhausted, exchanging only a few words with Elizabeth. The mansion felt like a silent battleground, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Despite the legal battles, Elizabeth made sure Cassandra's medical expenses were covered. Now in a rehabilitation center, Cassandra was learning to walk steadily again, regaining her life step by step. Elizabeth called occasionally to check on her progress. They were not friends, nor would they ever be, but there was a sense of mutual respect born from shared betrayal. Each was seeking to reclaim her life after James's duplicity. As winter approached, Elizabeth went into labor. A ferocious storm raged outside, rain lashing the windows of Rosemore Manor. James, frazzled and anxious, rushed Elizabeth to the hospital. Gone were the illusions of perfection. They arrived in the middle of the night, Elizabeth's contractions coming fast and furious. In the maternity ward, hours felt like days. Elizabeth grasped James's hand, tears of pain and fear mingling with residual anger. But in that crucible of raw emotion, amid the sting of contractions and the swirling hospital lights, something fragile but earnest emerged. A flicker of understanding that they were on the brink of a life-altering moment, a new life that transcended the tangled web of lies. Finally, at dawn, their baby was born, a beautiful girl with a strong, healthy cry. Exhausted, Elizabeth gazed upon their daughter, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. James was speechless, overcome by a wave of relief and awe. For a moment, the trials of the past months melted away. The baby was perfect. A new start, an innocent life, untainted by scandal or heartbreak. Holding the baby in her arms, Elizabeth felt a sense of purpose that transcended everything else. She wasn't sure if her marriage would survive, but she knew her love for this tiny person would guide her choices going forward. James kneeled beside the hospital bed, tears on his cheeks, whispering apologies and promises. Elizabeth closed her eyes, listening but not yet ready to respond. The baby's small hand curled around her finger. In that moment, Elizabeth decided that above all else, she would protect her child's future, even if it meant leaving James eventually. But she would give him a chance to prove he could be the father their daughter deserved. Weeks later, Elizabeth left the hospital with her newborn, who they named Clara Rose Harrington, a nod to the estate's beloved rose gardens. They returned to Rosemore Manor, where a new nursery awaited. Elizabeth took joy in small moments. Clara's gentle coos, the late-night feedings, the sense of wonder that accompanied new motherhood. James tried his best to atone. He was present for every feeding, changed diapers, sang lullabies off-key, but with genuine devotion. The lawsuit with Cassandra was settled quietly out of court for a substantial sum. She used the money to build a new life far away from James's orbit, but occasionally sent Elizabeth updates on her continued recovery, never to gloat, but as a courtesy. Elizabeth appreciated the gesture, though it came tinged with sorrow. As time passed, the scandal receded from tabloid headlines. Another celebrity controversy overshadowed James's story, allowing him to gradually restore his reputation. The reorganization of his wealth, insisted upon by Elizabeth, remained in place. The memory of betrayal lingered, but in the hush of late-night feedings, Elizabeth saw glimpses of a changed man in James. Whether it was remorse, fatherly love, or both, he seemed determined to be a better person for Clara, if not for himself. Did Elizabeth fully forgive him? Such wounds are slow to heal, if they ever do completely, but for now, a fragile peace settled over Rosemore Manor. On sunny mornings, they would walk together through the rose garden, Elizabeth cradling Clara, James pushing the stroller, trying to find a sense of normalcy after a storm of lies. If love remained, it was scarred but perhaps more honest than before. Sometimes, late at night, Elizabeth would lie awake, listening to Clara's soft breathing, recalling every twist and betrayal. She knew the future held no guarantees, but she resolved to raise her daughter to value truth, resilience, and self-respect. Whatever happened with James, Elizabeth vowed that Clara would never be deceived or neglected. She carried the lessons of this tumultuous chapter like armor, determined never to be blindsided again. And so, the tale of the millionaire who thought his mistress was safely in a coma, only for his pregnant wife to discover the hidden truth, ends in a tenuous equilibrium. Lives were shattered, then slowly pieced back together. Sins were exposed, consequences paid. In the end, the only constant was the unstoppable march of life itself, embodied by a little girl named Clara Rose, who symbolized both a painful past and a hopeful tomorrow. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of deceit, betrayal, and ultimately hard-earned redemption. In the heart of Rosemore Manor, amid hidden bank accounts and a fateful coma, we discovered that even the wealthiest, most glamorous lives can be torn apart by secrets. James Harrington's lies caught up with him in dramatic fashion, nearly destroying his marriage and costing Cassandra Delgado her life. Yet in the silent refuge of a newborn's embrace, the seeds of healing have begun to sprout. We hope this drama serves as a reminder that the truth may hurt, but deception can be far more destructive. If you found yourself captivated by this journey, please give this video a like, share it with friends who love a good real-life drama, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories. Your support helps us bring you the content you crave. Thank you for watching.